Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Christina Huidu. I'm the product specialist for Dimensions. And today we're going to be looking at open access analysis by using Google Sheets and calling out data from both the API as well as Dimensions that from Google BigQuery. I'm not going to be boring you with slides today at all. So we're just going to go in Google Sheets. If you have questions, feel free to add them in the chat, but also if you would like to be unmuted so we can have an actual conversation, that would also be absolutely fantastic. Just let me know and I will unmute you. Right, so as I started to work with Dimensions data more and more, Google Sheets has become one of my go-to places to number crunch. And for today, we are going to go through both some of the most common functions that I use, as well as a little bit of the thought process in when to call the API and when to call Dimensions BigQuery. And I have prepared this Google Sheet. So as you will see here in the front page, there are various tabs and cells that mark, and all of these can become variables for your report. In this particular case, it's an open access report at country level, and I chose my home country of the Netherlands. But there are various different other things that you can add. For example, the categorization system that you would want to use, all of the different FORs. So if you would want to do an FOR level analysis, rather than coding it in each and every time and then having to change your code and remember to change it, which is something I'm never good at. For me, it's just easier to call a cell and have Google Sheets remember all of that for me. But how do you do all of that? Well, the first step is to add the dimensions. Oops, I cannot type and talk for the so the first thing is to just install the Dimensions sheet add-on. And after you install it and just click OK on whatever pop-up appears there, you will find it here. So under your add-ons, you will have Dimensions API. You click Run Queries. The first time you open it, you will have to input your username and password, but then it will work. So for today, as I mentioned, I'm going to look at open access analysis, and it's not going to be a comprehensive open access analysis. We will never have time for that. But I would want to go through a little bit of what can become an open access analysis, as well as looking forward to all of your feedback and questions. Right, so the first thing is to look and call the data in the API. That's just the easiest thing to do. And you will notice here some callouts. So here I'm actually, instead of putting in the year, I'm calling out a cell, this one actually, G8 I think it was. Right, I'm calling a cell on my home tab. So I don't, if I change the years in the beginning of the sheet, then all of that just gets automatically updated. I don't have to worry about that. The same would be for countries. So if I want to redo the same analysis and I want to redo it for a different country, I just change it in the home page, and then everything gets changed as well. And I guess it would be worth discussing a little bit about the logic of the API. Some of you might be familiar with it, so this piece, I guess you can tune out and just let those of you that aren't quite familiar with it. So this, for me, it looks a lot like broken English. You tell the API that it needs to search where, so in publications, it needs to search for grants, for clinical trials, or of the other content type, and then all of the different facets. So if you think of the user interface at the left-hand side, after the where, that is when you just type in all of the filters. In this case is year and research org country. So what is the country of the organizations that I'm interested in? And then what I want returned. This is one of the great things of the API is that you can return aggregated facets, in this case, the open access categories, and of course, aggregating the FCR, and you get the data. And you can do this multiple times in one tab. So I have one where I'm calling out and returning the open access categories, as you can see them here, and another tab where I'm returning the year, so I can make a timeline out of this. But as you can see, they're not particularly pretty numbers returned, and I'm quite peculiar about that. So what I do, I have some tabs that are just for calling out data, and colorful tabs where I make stuff pretty. So this is one example. So in the open access categories, as you can see them here, they have the tabs that are returned from the API, but I want them in a very specific format. And that is where I start using the Excel functions, well, Google Sheets functions. This is a query function, is probably the single query, the single function that I use the most by far, and it's quite versatile as well. So here I'm just saying that I want you, Google Sheet, to look in this particular tab and select only these cells, well, columns. Order them by A, which in this case is number of publications in descending order. So I would know that this is open access, there's these many publications, and this is the FCR. But then I can also manipulate how the FCR looks like. And that is done, of course, from here. And you just choose different number format, and then you select the number format that you have, which means that you can create charts that are very easy to read for people that have never made a chart in their life, don't particularly care how they look like and why, and don't have the, I guess, the data science level insight that you would have when you're creating these. So they become very easy to read. You would know that this yellow chart, this yellow line is the FCR, and it's this much for hybrid publications, and for pure gold, this is the FCR, and so on. Another cool function of Google Sheets are these drop downs, which means that you can have semi-interactive charts. So in case you really want to show someone your results in chart format, this is probably one of the tricks that will help you the most. So the way you make these, you just select, you just select any of the tabs that you need. You go to data and data validation, and then you fill in the range and the list of items. And I want A, B, C. And then I have my ABC here. Right, I'll remove these later. But this means that once I create my chart and I move to open access, then I can have FCR and the number of closed publications with international collaboration for closed publications, and total publications as well. Or I can look at closed FCR and open access FCR, and you notice that my chart is changing at the same time. Also, when talking about just calling data from DSL, there are specific limitations. So you can return facets, but you can return them up to 1,000. And of course, Google Sheets has its own limitations, which means that you cannot return thousands upon thousands of rows, because then no one would be able to compute them. So making the most of the space is probably the easiest way to go about it, and that is where I stopped searching or calling and using DSL, and I move into Google BigQuery. But before I go there, this is just an additional chart, so you can add these types of numbering, these types of callouts to your sheets, and these are all just queries, all of them not being coded in with the parameters, but again, just going into the home page. And now is when the fun part starts. And let's just go to connection settings. what this is calling data from Google BigQuery. You don't really have to go out of this setting. So if you are comfortable with using Google Sheets, you don't have to go outside of this environment. It just, all of it comes to you, which is quite easy for me to work with the data. But it also means that once you define what you need, but you're not very familiar with SQL, or you don't want to learn it, you don't have time to learn it, you can ask one of your colleagues to write it for you, and then you will start number crunching in this type of environment. So what this query does, and you will notice it's slightly different from DSL, because the select and the parameters that I want are in the beginning, and then where I want it from. So the select publications in DSL actually are this from part, and additional joins. So I'm calling other tables, and it looks slightly different from DSL, but not too different. I tend to think of this as a Kinder egg, but instead of a toy in the middle, you get more code. Right, so now I get the data and I get publications at world level that have been mentioned at least once in a patent. And I want, I return the publication ID, of course, the FCR, all of the countries, the years in the last 10 years, the grade ID of the research organization and the name, of course, the publishers, and the 4-digit level FOR categorization. And if you're not familiar with what the FOR is, this is just one of the categories that exist in Dimensions. It is assigned at article level / item level for the other content types. And it has 2 levels, one with double digits. So 22 would be medicine. Well, no, I think 22 is something else, but I never remember them properly. And then you have subdivisions at 4-digit level that are, well, subdivisions. And then open access, where you get the top level, so open access and all open access and closed, as well as subdivisions of the open access information. And all of this, once you get the code, you can stop thinking of SQL, because now you're in the same Google Sheets environment, and you can use pivot tables where you can extract all of this data in a new sheet or in an existing sheet. And I have some extracts here where I extracted, and I'm just going to click on it so my filters appear. Where are my filters? Or I can just extract it again. Right, pivot table, new sheet. And I will tell it that I want the IDs and the values, and the countries and the rows. And of course, I want them to count as unique. And what else it was there? I think the open access categories. I'll just add them here as well. And I can choose how I want them sorted, because I just want the top number of open access publications to be on top, and the countries. And you can see that as I'm dragging and dropping through the data, my table updates as well. So you don't really need to remember or think too much of it. And it also gives you instant insight. So you will notice that the US and the UK, most of their publications being mentioned in patents are actually open access, whereas China, and it was the same for Japan, they're closed publications, which is a fascinating insight into the way publishing patterns are in different countries and different parts of the world. And of course, it would differ from mandate to mandate if they exist or not, collaboration patterns and so on. But this is just a way to get instant insights. And of course, you can have more than one pivot table, like in any number crunching platform. Google Sheets is no different. So the way you would do that is just go again to pivot table. I want an existing sheet. I'm just going to rename it because I never B6. B6, and I want it in B6 G1. Why doesn't it work? Let's see why that doesn't work. It should work. Existing sheet. Just a minute. We shall figure it all out. V6. There it is. And now in my same sheet, I can make an additional pivot table or more. So I have this example here where I extracted number of organizations and the IDs, and that's for the Netherlands. You can always just go back to the code and see it. And also when you click, you can always see the pivot table editor. So if you want to edit your table, it will just call out the data again. And even though in the connected sheet, in the actual connected tab, you won't see all of the data extracted, you only see a preview. By using this pivot tables or just any of the functions that are available, you are able to query directly into Dimensions, millions of rows of data, but you only extract what you need. So you don't have to extract all of the data in Google Sheets. Right, so here we have the organizations by number of publications that have been mentioned in patents in the last 10 years and turning them into a chart. And the same would be here with the timeline. And last but not least, you can also just merge the data. Some of it will come from Google BigQuery, and other would come from a DSL query. So you can take make the most of both worlds, I guess, without having to have multiple queries, especially if it's just something as simple that can be returned with a very basic query in just the side of the sheet. So you can get these types of insights. So 17% of open access publications in Belgium or 1.6% in the Netherlands have been mentioned in patents. And this really is just scratching the surface when it comes to what you can do by connecting to Google Sheets and extracting the data from both DSL and Google BigQuery, particularly when BigQuery can extract you data in seconds of very complicated insights that wouldn't really be possible otherwise. And the last part that I wanted to show you was the data summary, because as we've done the analysis, and in this case, it's quite a basic one, we would know better what we want our readers to see and understand from our analysis. But of course, we don't really want to write it every single time. So again, you can use all sorts of functions like the if or query, like in this case, to build an automated text. And then when you're happy with that, you can copy this into a Google document or a Google version of a PowerPoint. And once you change this and you have a different country, then it will change. All the data will change. You only need to change your parameters, which saves large amounts of data, large amounts of time, and you just need to think of it once, and then you would just change the parameters and everything just works. And I will stop here with the presenting part, but I'm really looking forward to your questions. Just tell me if any of this has been useful, if you plan on doing any of this, if you would need help, if you would like to debate or challenge anything that I've said. I am looking forward to all of it. Any questions? I see a raised hand. Let me unmute you. So now you have full control on Tahereh. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you have full control over your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Okay. Hi. Thanks so much for the presentation. To be honest, I mean, I have I have lots of questions, but I'll just I'm trying my best to put them in words. First of all, when do you use this? When do you recommend to use this? And when do you recommend to use the API? If I want to, I mean, use the API and this, what's the difference between them? I mean, which data can I obtain from here and from that from the API I cannot, I mean, obtain? The other thing is that to be honest, I mean, I was lost because I don't know how to set the connection. I'm unfamiliar with this environment, so I don't know because I saw there was a code. You're obviously writing something and then you set the connection. So how can I, because I mean, the part you said the connection with SQL. Maybe that's a stupid question because I'm not familiar with this environment. So it would be nice to start with to see how you wrote that bit of SQL thingy. That would be nice. Thank you so much.
Those are very, very good questions. I'll start with the last one. So if you go to data and data connectors and connect to BigQuery, and then you connect to your project, the one that is set to the billing part, right? SQL, your custom SQL, and this is just the blank slate where you add your query. Let me just make this smaller. And then the first question, when I choose to use DSL and when I go for BigQuery, I tend to go to use DSL for very simple queries, just like this one here. So search for publications or grants where year is in this particular time frame, and I want this organizations, and I'm only interested in top 10. But for complicated queries like this particular one, when I was looking at publications worldwide, so searching in 100 million publications, for anyone that has at least one patent mention, that takes at least 2 separate queries, and you would need a Python environment for that, which Google Sheets is obviously not the right place to do that kind of analysis. So I start using the connected sheet and querying BigQuery when the data that I need to number crunch is literally impossible to get through Google Sheets, either because of just simple row limitations, so I cannot return 50,000 rows, because although the API would allow me to return 50,000 rows, just crunching them would probably kill my browser. So it's just not a sustainable approach if you would want to have more than one analysis in multiple tabs across the sheets. But for everything else, just returning years, returning the top 10 most cited organizations, you can do that with DSL. So everything that is not very complicated, you can return it with DSL and Google Sheets, or of course you can use the Python environment, and even that, if you use Google Colab, you can dump the data into Google Sheets. But that's something I don't use on a daily basis because I prefer this cheats type of approach. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, clear now. Thank you.
That's great. Any additional questions?
Sorry, again, me. I forgot. Are we going to have access to these sheets? Is it going to be shared with us, or is it, I mean, like to sample? Sorry, just jumped in without raising hand.
No, that's okay. Now you are muted, so you have full control over your mic. I'm just typing in my email address. Since I didn't prepare slides. So just feel free to reach out to me using that email address. And I can actually, I think I can copy paste it in the chat. There. So feel free to drop me an email, because the SQL part won't work unless you have access to BigQuery. So it won't help you too much. But if you would want to use the API and query that way, and then use more complicated queries through Colab in a Python environment, but still find a number crunching in Google Sheets, or any other option, just let me know and drop me a line, and we'll figure out a way. Hi, Camilla, you have full control over your mic.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It looks very interesting to dive into. If we would use the data this way, are there any limitations compared to if we use the earlier way of accessing data? Because I understand it as we need the subscription to access the data.
Yeah,
but are there any differences in what we can do with the data if we use the one or the other way?
There are, so if you use Google BigQuery, which I guess is what your question hints towards, you can do large amounts of number crunching significantly faster because you don't have any limitations to the amount of data that you can query in one go. And this particular example is probably a very good one, because this would be 2 queries in the API. It is still possible, but it'd be 2 queries that you would have to split and return in batches of 1,000 and group them together and disambiguate them, deduplicate the publications that you return. So it takes longer. It's not impossible. It doesn't mean the API is worse. By no means I'm trying to say that. It's just that Google BigQuery is making everything faster. And it also means that I can still use this environment and not have to learn advanced Python so I can do everything that I need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I wanted to know just if if we access the data this way, we can still use it like we use in our agreement with you. There's no limitations. Yeah.
No,
Thank
there
you.
are no limitations. Yep. Any more questions? I'm actually quite curious to see if you are using any advanced functions, because I'm on this quest of learning more and more Google Sheets functions, which to my colleagues, I guess, would be no surprise. But if you have any tips and tricks, I would be more than happy to learn from you. Or more questions. No questions? Okay, in this case, we finish 30 minutes earlier, and you all get 30 minutes back. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out through my email. It's in the chat. And whenever you have questions, just reach out and I'll be happy to help you. And thank you all for taking the time today, and have a lovely rest of the day wherever in the world you are. Oh, Camilla, yes?
Sorry, it was my hand was raised. Sorry, but thank you very well. Thank you for this sneak peek to Google BigQuery.
Happy to. Thank you all. Bye.